U.S. Navy examined sunk Japanese Yamato, found 18-inch armor belt that no Allied shell could penetrate, April 7, 1945. 2:21 p.m., East China Sea, 200 miles southwest of Kyushu. The Avenger's bomb bay doors shivered in the slipstream like loose teeth. Oil smell, cordite, salt. I lay on my belly at the waist gun, cheek against cold metal, feeling the aircraft quiver every time the pilot trimmed for the chop coming off the whitecaps below. Through the open hatch, the sea looked hammered flat, hammered mean, a sheet of tin beaten by invisible fists. Ahead, black smudges writhed in the sky, smoke, flak, and the gaunt silhouettes of other torpedo planes rising and falling on the swells of air. 2 o'clock low. Big one, the pilot said in a voice that pretended to be calm. I slid the gun and found it. A triangle of spray, a feather of wake, and then the ship shouldering out of the sea as if the ocean had given birth to a fortress. Her sides were so straight they seemed arrogant. Her bow threw a wall of water taller than houses, paint scoured, decks crowded, gun mounts spitting like hornets. Yamato. She didn't look like a ship. She looked like a stubborn fact the world had to go round. The first wave had already struck. On her port side, a dark smear widened where a torpedo had taken hold. We came in low, stuttering across the white combers, our propeller biting at spray. The dive bombers were dots above, peeling and blossoming into screams. The fighters stitched the decks with bright, crawling sparks. The torpedo planes slid under the fire like fish, patient and hungry. Flak came up in black fists. Some bursts were close enough to taste, burnt rubber and hot iron, sprinkling the fuselage with grit that sounded like rain on a barn roof. A fragment rang off the mount by my wrist, and my hand jerked, slapping against the frame. Between the knuckles of my glove, a smear of leaked ink stained my skin. Earlier, I'd checked the names scratched inside the hatch. Men I knew and men I didn't. I rubbed at it as if I could rub away fear. "Hold steady," the pilot said. "Wait for the crosswind." I watched Yamato's turrets. 3 great houses turning with the terrible patience of clocks. One belched a flower of flame that shouldn't have belonged to anything made by men. The concussion reached us as a shove in the chest. I saw a shell's wake score the sea and vanish, the invisible weight of it racing past our fragile tin. Ahead of us, an Avenger threw its fish, then kicked up on a wing and clawed away. The torpedo ran true, a white tail in the green, and when it struck, there was not a bang, but a heavy, wet heave, as if the ocean itself had coughed. Yamato listed another degree. The crew still fired, small men on a vast roof, ants with lightning in their hands. "Now," the pilot said. The bombardier's arm moved, one clean motion, and the torpedo slid, a silver thought leaving the mind. We were suddenly lighter. The ocean tilted. The horizon leapt. A line of tracers stitched toward us, neat, polite, each one a red bead on an invisible string, then not polite at all as they reaped the air by my shoulder. I squeezed the trigger, and the gun's chatter filled my bones. Somewhere above, a hellcat roared down the length of the deck and threw a line of flame like a man drawing a match across God's own table. We banked, low and wide, giving the weapon its run. A wind gust hissed across the bay doors, and the airplane lurched. I saw the torpedo's wake curve, adjust, keep faith. Yamato heeled again, slow and stubborn, her armor shining wet as a whale's back. For a heartbeat, I forgot the gun, forgot the men yelling in my headphones, forgot even the sky. I saw only that belt of steel along her side, vertical, immaculate, too thick for reason. a wall against the world. She took our hit and lived. We clawed for altitude, the pilot breathing hard now, the engine coughing once and then catching. Behind us, the sea burst in many places at once. A bloom of orange climbed from the forward deck. Smoke boiled into shapes that couldn't hold themselves and fell back in tatters. The radio filled with voices, some clipped, some cracked, some too calm. A name I knew suddenly went quiet, and the channel swallowed it without a ripple. I had a photograph in my breast pocket, my brother in his navy blues, eyes still full of December innocence. The corner of it had curled from sweat. I pressed it flat with my palm as if I could iron the creases out of this day, out of the century. Then I looked back through the hatch at the ship that refused to sink, at the impossible weight she kept above water by the sheer authority of her armor. We thought the day belonged to our courage. It belonged to physics, to steel, to the stubborn arithmetic of war. Before the sea turned into a graveyard of steel and fire, before the sky filled with men who would not all return, I was just 22 and working the lumber docks in Astoria, Oregon. Salt spray mornings, fog catching on the masts of trawlers, gulls so loud they sounded like arguments. I used to think that life moved slowly there, not soft, but steady. Work, supper, sleep. And on Saturdays, the radio humming some crooner whose voice made the whole world feel smaller, gentler. My name is Daniel Hayes, gunner's mate 3rd class, Torpedo Squadron 47, USS Bunker Hill. But I wasn't born into war. I was born into the smell of wet pine and diesel, into hands calloused from rope and crates, and the stubborn weight of wood, soaked by rain. My father had served in the First War. He never talked about it except to say, "Bravery isn't what you feel, it's what you do when you're scared." He said it the morning I left, without looking at me, as though he were ashamed of giving the advice too late. My mother packed me sandwiches like I was only going down to the pier. She stood at the screen door watching me go, trying not to cry, and the sound of that door shutting behind me has followed me farther than any airplane ever flew. I enlisted in 1943, not because I hated anyone, but because every boy I'd grown up with was vanishing into uniforms. Some came back on leave, proud and sunburned, with stories about far-off islands where the rain tasted sweet and the nights smelled like burning sugar cane. Others came back in quiet boxes, the whole town lined up to salute. You learn quickly that war isn't only overseas. It lives in the empty chairs at supper tables. When I joined the Navy, I thought flying was glamorous. I imagined bright sun, polished wings, the clean certainty of machinery obeying a human hand. The first time I climbed into an Avenger, I realized how foolish that dream was. The cockpit smelled like sweat and old fear. The metal was cold as river stones, and the gunner's seat, my seat, felt like a question with no right answers. But there was also this, the men, Tommy Blake from Tuscaloosa, who whistled hymns during takeoff because he claimed it kept the engine honest. Fitzpatrick from Boston, who carried a deck of cards in his flight suit and swore the Queen of Hearts was his guardian angel. And our pilot, Lieutenant Henry Morse, who never raised his voice and never panicked, not even when the sky turned black with tracers. They were not heroes when I met them, just men learning how to become more than they'd been, men pretending not to be afraid. I had a girl then, too, Clara. She worked at the cannery office, wore blue dresses, and wrote me letters that smelled faintly of lemon soap. In her last one before Okinawa, she wrote, "When you come home, I want to hear everything. Every sound, every sight, everything you felt. I folded that line and kept it in my pocket because I didn't know how to tell her that some things aren't meant to be remembered, let alone spoken. Before Yamato, I still believed war had rules, that courage was simple, that the world made sense if you held on to something pure. The morning we took off to meet her, I believed bravery meant not being afraid. I was wrong. Fear is the truth under every engine roar. Bravery is what you do despite it. April 7th, 1945, 11:42 a.m., East China Sea. The first moment the war became real wasn't when I saw Yamato. It was when the sky broke open. We were 30 minutes from target, flying in formation so tight I could read the serial numbers on the plane beside us. The sea below was calm enough to look harmless, a great sheet of blue hammered silver by the sun. For a while, the only sounds were the engine's steady growl and the faint rasp of oxygen masks rubbing against stubble. Then the radio cracked. One sharp burst like someone snapping a dry twig. "Bandits rising from 210, multiple, fast." Lieutenant Morse didn't curse, didn't even exhale sharply. He just tilted the Avenger 2 degrees and said, "Eyes left, Danny?" I swung the gun around, feeling the harness bite into my shoulders. At first I saw nothing, just sky and glare. Then the shapes boiled up from the horizon, small, dark, glinting, dozens, maybe more, zeros. They didn't come in politely. They didn't dive like eagles or howl like wolves. They came like needles thrown by a furious hand, thin, precise, impossible to follow with the naked eye. The first burst of tracer fire whipped past our wingtips so close it felt like someone had flicked sparks off the metal. "Keep your arcs clean," Morse said. "Calm, always calm. No crowding your shots." The first impact wasn't on us. It was on the Avenger 5 planes ahead. One moment it was there, a single gleaming shape bobbing on the air. The next, a wing sheared off as neatly as if a giant had snapped a toy. The aircraft folded, dipped, and spiraled down, trailing black smoke like spilled ink. The radio didn't catch their voices. It rarely did. Men disappeared faster than sound. My hands were sweating so badly I nearly dropped the grips of the gun. I swallowed, tried to steady the barrel. Another zero slid across my sight picture, too fast, too sharp. I squeezed the trigger anyway. The Avenger shook as the 50s barked, brass shell casings bouncing and clattering around my knees. "You got him spooked," Tommy's voice said from the radio man's bay. He sounded like he was grinning. He always sounded like that. "Good boy, Danny." A shadow swept over us. A zero streaked down from above, raking our tail with gunfire. The whole plane shuddered. Something pinged hard against the bulkhead near my foot. I smelled hot metal. "Damage?" Morse asked. "Still with you?" Tommy answered. "Tail's bleeding a little, but we're green." I saw flashes on the horizon. Tiny bursts of orange like matches struck in the distance. Those were our dive bombers already trading fire with the ship's outer pickets. Thunderheads of flak rolled upward to meet them, blooming like poisonous flowers. And then the ocean far below fractured with white plumes. Depth charge bursts? No, something bigger. Naval gunfire. Yamato was firing blind across 15 miles of empty sea, trying to swat us before we'd even arrived. The concussion of each shell hitting water reached us through the air in faint shivers, like distant giants stomping across a floor. "This is it," Morse said. "Stay tight. We break the clouds in 60 seconds." My mouth was dry as sand. I checked the safety, checked it again, gripped the gun so hard my wrists ached. I could hear my heartbeat inside my mask. thumping against my ears like someone knocking from the inside of my skull. Fitzpatrick's voice crackled, thin but steady. "Boys, remember, when we drop out of these clouds, that monster's going to be under us. Do not freeze." I thought of freeze. I thought of the dock men back home who told stories about courage like it was something you pulled out of a pocket. I thought of Clara's lemon-scented letter folded in my chest. And I thought of the ship waiting ahead, the ship that had sunk our friends, battered our fleets, and stood thick as a fortress against everything we'd learned to fear. The clouds thinned, light flickered beneath us, and then, as if a curtain had been torn aside, I saw the first real glimpse of Yamato, her wake clawing the sea in two, her guns turning upward, her armor soaking sunlight like polished stone. When the dust cleared, I would write later in my journal, the only sound left was my heartbeat. War, I learned that day, isn't a single moment of terror. It's a chain of them, linked so tightly together that you stop noticing where one ends and the next begins. April 7th, 1945, 12:05 p.m. We broke through the last layer of cloud, and Yamato filled the world beneath us. She wasn't moving fast, but she didn't need to. A ship that size didn't cut through water so much as push the ocean aside. Her wake fanned out in two long white scars. Her deck was a maze of steel in motion, anti-aircraft mounts swiveling like angry insects, figures running, smoke drifting from her funnels. But it was the guns, those monstrous 18.1-inch guns that froze me. 3 great turrets, each broader than a farmhouse, turning upward with deliberate weight. I knew intellectually that those guns were meant to kill other ships. But watching them tilt toward aircraft, toward us, felt like watching a cathedral aim itself at a fly. Fitzpatrick's voice snapped the trance. "Second wave, form on me. Torpedo runs from port and starboard. Bombers, keep her busy." Our Avenger rocked violently as Morse banked left. Wind roared across the fuselage, rattling the thin skin of the plane. Below us, Corsairs and Hellcats dove in shrieking arcs, their wings flashing white as they released rockets. Black puffs of flak swallowed them like angry bursts of smoke. "Keep your eyes open," Tommy said through the intercom. "She's throwing up enough iron to build another battleship." He wasn't exaggerating. Tracers streaked upward in red-orange rivers, punctured by larger blossoms of flak that spat hot shrapnel across the sky. Every explosion sent shock waves that slapped our fuselage like giant palms. Morse dipped a wing. "Gunner, how close are they?" I swung the turret. A Zero was angling across our formation, gaining altitude fast. It wasn't aiming for us yet, but it didn't matter. Any plane left alive long enough could become deadly. "Zero high, 10 o'clock, I said. "Copy. Hold him off." The Avenger descended in a shallow arc. Behind us, the dive bombers peeled off, their payloads released, their mission done. Now, it was on us, the torpedo teams, the ones who had to fly low within spitting distance of the ocean, straight into the teeth of both the ship and its escorting guns. "Coming down to 60 feet, Morse warned. The altimeter needle swept downward. My stomach rose into my throat. The sea grew larger, brighter, harder. Spray from exploding shells misted the air. Then the world shook. A flak burst erupted so close on our right side that the plane bounced sideways as if slapped. Metal rang. The turret jolted so hard it smashed my shoulder. I gasped, tasted copper. "I'm fine," I forced out. "Superficial." "You sure?" Morse asked, voice clipped, focused. "Yes." Another lie. this one for myself. My arm felt half dead. We leveled barely above the water, so low that the spray streaked the underside of the plane. I could see Yamato's bow now, cutting the sea with a precision that felt unnatural. Her forward turrets were already tracking another group of Avengers, their barrels glowing faint orange from firing. Her secondary batteries turned toward us. "Torpedo doors open!" Tommy called. His voice was higher now, stretched thinner. "We're in range in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. It felt like 20 heartbeats, 20 lifetimes. Yamato was coming broadside to us now, a wall of steel with slanted armor that seemed to swallow sunlight. She was massive, overwhelming, almost immovable. From this distance, she didn't look like a ship. She looked like a mountain pretending to float. Tracer streams ripped across the water, stitching white lines toward us. "Steady," Morse murmured. Another flak shell burst ahead, water leaping 30 feet high. Morse pulled left, skimming just above the swell. The engine screamed. My teeth rattled. Tommy shouted, "Release in 3, 2, 1." A dull, mechanical thunk. The torpedo dropped clean. I saw its silver body hit the water and vanish beneath the foam. "Fish away!" Tommy yelled. "We're good!" We weren't good, not yet, because now came the part no one talked about, the part that separated the living from the dead. "Hang on," Morse warned. "We're running the gauntlet." Yamato's port batteries erupted in a storm of tracers and cannon bursts. The closer we flew, the denser the fire became, until the sky felt like it was turning solid, filled with steel pellets, red streaks, and invisible shards of white-hot metal. I don't remember aiming. I don't even remember breathing. My hands moved on their own, swinging the gun, squeezing the trigger whenever something flickered in my sight picture. 1-0 dove straight at us, a suicide angle. I fired a burst. It veered, clipped our tail, spun out trailing smoke. "Danny, you still with me?" Tommy's voice strained. "Yes." Ahead, Morse pulled us into a rising arc, climbing back toward the cloud layer. The ocean fell away. The gunfire grew distant. Yamato shrank slightly, but only slightly. Then a flash behind us, a rising column of water. Our torpedo hit. A moment of silence filled the intercom. Not joy, not cheering, just silence. The kind that comes from knowing one small piece of an impossible mission had gone right. But Yamato didn't slow. She didn't stagger. Her massive hull simply swallowed the impact, water boiling up along her flank. "Minimal effect," Tommy said quietly. "It's something," Morse answered. "It was, but it wasn't enough. Not yet." Ahead, the next wave of Avengers was already diving. Behind us, the smoke of burning planes smeared the clouds. All around us, men fought and vanished and kept fighting. War wasn't loud or dramatic in those long minutes. It was methodical, relentless. A machine grinding forward, and we were inside it. There is a moment in every battle when fear stops being a roar and becomes a whisper. Mine came sometime after our second torpedo run, when the sky over Yamato turned into a living storm. It was 13:08 p.m. The fourth wave was diving in, and we had taken our place in the fifth, circling just above the cloud layer to buy time. Our Avenger felt lighter now. Both torpedoes gone. Half our ammo spent. The metal skin around the turret bore scars the size of fists. Morse was steady at the controls, though fatigue had etched itself into his voice. Tommy rechecked the bomb bay doors even though he knew they were empty, and I sat in the turret, watching the chaos below through a frame of smeared plexiglass. Yamato was burning now, not sinking, not slowing, just burning. Flames crawled up the superstructure like yellow vines. Black smoke poured out in oily coils, torn apart by gusts from the ship's turning. And through all of it, those monstrous guns still moved, broken in places, but not silent. I had never seen anything fight like that. Not a man, not a machine, not even an empire. It felt like watching a wounded god trying to stand. Tommy's voice broke the silence. "Danny, you good back there?" I opened my mouth to say yes, but then I saw it. A corsair spiraling out of the clouds, trailing flame, cutting a crooked line toward the ocean. The pilot didn't bail out. He didn't have time. The plane hit the water with a flash of white, then disappeared as if it had never existed. I knew the man flying it. Lytton Howard Lane. We'd played cards on the deck 2 nights earlier. He'd asked if I thought we'd make it through Okinawa. I'd told him nobody knew. He'd laughed and said he'd take maybe over no any day. Now he was gone. I didn't answer Tommy. Couldn't. The radio crackled. "All torpedo planes, Yamato turning hard to port. She's flooding on the starboard side. Hit her again before she recovers." Morse adjusted course. "They're calling us in." "But we're empty," Tommy said. "They want bodies, not bombs," Morse replied. "We draw fire. We keep her chasing us instead of the others." My stomach turned. Flying low and empty meant being the most attractive target in the sky. We wouldn't have a payload to release, no justification for the risk, just a plane full of men trying to distract the biggest battleship ever built. Tommy whispered, "Jesus." Then the voice of Rear Admiral Deo cut through the channel, calm, steady, absolute. "Every second she stays afloat costs American lives on Okinawa. Do your duty. In this, do your duty." Men had died under that sentence for centuries. Morse banked down. Here we go. The world rushed upward as we dove, clouds whipping past, wind screaming against the fuselage, the engine straining. I gripped the turret handles until my knuckles were white. Below us, Yamato loomed larger, smoke curling like breath from a wounded animal. Tracer fire lit the sky immediately. Red needles stretched toward us. Flak bursts opened like black flowers, each petal deadly. Every instinct in my body screamed to climb, to run, to get away, but Morse kept pushing the nose down. Closer, closer, too close. A shell burst under our left wing. The plane lurched so violently my vision went white. The turret slammed into my shoulder, and for a moment I thought the wing had torn clean off. But the engine kept humming. The frame held. "Left aileron sluggish," Morse said through clenched teeth. "We're leaking hydraulic fluid," Tommy answered. "Keep her steady," I said. "She doesn't need perfect, just alive." Yamato grew immense beneath us. I could see crewmen on the deck now, tiny figures running between gun mounts, some firing, some carrying hoses, some simply staring up at us like men watching the sky fall. We came lower, too low. Morse shouted, "Brace!" The Avenger skimmed the forward deck, so close I could have sworn I felt the heat from the burning superstructure. The roar of her guns shook the plane, the shock waves slapping our fuselage. And then, the moment. A Zero burst out from behind her tower, point blank, coming straight for us. Not angling, not evading, coming to kill us or die trying. Its wings were riddled with holes. The canopy cracked, smoke trailing from its tail, a plane on fire flying on will alone. Tommy screamed into the intercom, "He's coming right at us." I swung the turret. The Zero filled my scope. Too big, too close. My finger froze. I saw the pilot's face, young, burned, eyes locked on us with a conviction that chilled my blood. He wasn't trying to shoot us. He was trying to ram us. Time collapsed. Sound vanished. The world narrowed to one impossible decision: shoot or die. I didn't want to. He didn't hesitate. My hands moved before my mind did. I fired. The bullets tore through his cockpit. His head jerked. The Zero peeled right, smoke trailing, missed our wing by inches, and plunged into the ocean, exploding in a column of steam. My breath broke. My hands shook violently on the grips. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing inside me worked. The intercom was silent for a long moment. Then Morse said softly, almost like a prayer, "We go home now." We climbed back toward the clouds, leaving the burning Titan below us. In those seconds, something inside me shifted, something quiet and painful, not victory, not pride, just the understanding that everyone down there, American or Japanese, was fighting with the same fear, the same desperation, the same dreams they'd never see again. After that day, I could never look at my hands the same way again. The sky above us was eerily calm as we climbed through the last layer of cloud. The sunlight was thin and pale, stretching across the horizon like a fading promise. For a few seconds, there was no gunfire, no smoke, no screaming engines, just the dull hum of our own battered Avenger trying to keep itself together. Tommy finally exhaled. It sounded like he had been holding that breath for a lifetime. Morse kept his hands locked on the controls, his knuckles white. His voice was steady, but something in it had changed, like a violin string pulled just a little too tight. "She'll hold," he said, "if we don't stress her." We didn't. None of us spoke. None of us moved more than we had to. The silence inside the plane felt almost sacred, as if breaking it might be the thing that brought us down. Below the cloud deck, the battle still raged, muffled thumps rising through the mist like distant thunder. Every now and then, a flash of orange glowed against the clouds as another strike hit Yamato or one of her escorts. But from where we were, it all seemed unreal, like watching a storm from behind a window. I didn't look through my gun sight anymore. I stared at my hands instead, hands that still trembled from firing at a man I had seen too clearly. They didn't feel like my hands, not anymore. They felt like they belonged to someone older, someone who had seen too much. Tommy finally spoke, his voice soft. "Danny, you did what you had to do." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I knew he was right, and I hated that he was right. War doesn't give you room for mercy. It's a machine that demands decisions, not feelings. And still, feelings come. Morse adjusted our heading. "We're clear. Turning back toward Task Force 58. The engine coughed once, a harsh metallic sound that made all three of us jump, then settled into an uneven rumble. Not good, but not deadly. Not yet. As we leveled out, the clouds beneath us glowed brighter. Then the glow turned orange, then red. Tommy leaned toward the window. "What in—" A pillar of fire erupted through the cloud layer. It wasn't a bomb blast. It wasn't ammunition cooking off. It was bigger, brighter, hotter. A plume of flame climbed thousands of feet into the air, churning with black smoke and molten debris. The shock wave hit us a moment later, a deep, vibrating thump that rattled the plane's frame. Morse steadied us with both hands. God Almighty! There was no doubt what it was. Yamato's magazines had gone. The largest battleship ever built, 72,000 tons of steel and ambition, had detonated in one final monstrous breath. The cloud layer below us rippled like something alive. Burning fragments of steel punched through the mist, arcing back toward the sea. A column of black smoke rose higher and higher until it pierced the sunlight. No ship could survive a blast like that. Tommy whispered, "It's over." But even as he said it, the radio crackled to life. Voices shouting coordinates, calling for rescue craft, reporting losses. Nothing was over? Not really? War doesn't end when the enemy ship disappears. It ends in pieces. First the roar, then the smoke, then the silence that feels too heavy for air. As we joined the straggling formation heading home, I looked down at the swirling clouds, at the place where Yamato had been moments before. Men were still in that water, hundreds, maybe thousands. Some would live, many wouldn't. And for reasons I could never fully explain, I found myself whispering something I didn't expect. "I'm sorry." Not because I regretted surviving, not because I regretted fighting, but because somewhere below, sailors who had never seen my face were dying the same way our boys had, alone, afraid, clinging to hope in a sea turning colder by the second. War doesn't care who's right, it only cares who's left. We flew on, toward the distant silhouettes of our carriers. The sun was beginning to descend, painting the sky gold. It should have been a beautiful sight. It used to be, but that day it felt like the world was dimming around the edges. We landed with hydraulic lines leaking, bullet holes stitched across our fuselage, and fuel so low it barely sloshed in the tank. Crewmen ran to help us out. Someone patted my shoulder. Someone else said we were heroes. I didn't feel like one. I felt hollow, as if part of me had sunk with that ship. We were ordered below deck that evening after the mechanics confirmed our Avenger was too damaged to fly again without a full overhaul. Morse sat with his back against the bulkhead, his flight suit peeled open to the waist, his undershirt soaked in sweat and oil. Tommy lay stretched out on a cot, staring at the ceiling as if it were some distant, unreachable sky. I sat between them, still in my turret harness, unable to unclench my fists, even hours later. No one talked about heroism that night. No one talked about victory. Men who had been loud hours before now whispered like they were afraid of waking ghosts. Because ghosts were everywhere. Every empty seat in the ready room. Every name that didn't answer at roll call. Every bunk that would stay neat and untouched for the rest of the tour. Yamato had died in a single, terrible explosion. But our losses came in pieces. One plane at a time, one friend at a time, one breath at a time. The captain made an announcement over the intercom shortly after midnight. His voice was cracked from reading casualty lists. Today, American airmen sank the largest battleship ever built. You should know what that means for the war, but you should also know what it cost. He didn't need to elaborate. Everyone on board already knew. I thought about the Japanese pilot I had shot down, the boy with fire in his eyes and smoke on his wings. In another life, maybe he would have been someone's friend, someone's brother, someone's father. Maybe he would have lived long enough to grow old. In this life, he crossed paths with me for 3 seconds in a sky filled with steel. And those 3 seconds sealed both our fates, the only difference being that mine continued. Survival is not the same as victory. Sometimes it feels closer to death. In the days that followed, the Navy assembled what facts they could. Sailors who'd been closest to the explosion reported that Yamato didn't just sink, it disintegrated. Her bow, they said, split away like a broken tooth. Her midsection vanished in a plume of molten steel. Out of more than 3,000 men, fewer than 300 survived. We had killed a giant, but the ocean had swallowed thousands to make it so. Later, in the quiet hours before dawn, Morse said something that stayed with me for decades. "You know, Danny, they built that ship believing she could outfight the future." I didn't reply. He kept talking anyway. But nothing, not steel, not firepower, not pride, outfights the future. It just delays it for a little while. He wasn't speaking like a pilot. He was speaking like a man who finally understood the cost of every advancement in war, the cost measured not in weapons, but in lives. Weeks later, we learned that the sinking of Yamato marked the end of an era. Never again would battleships decide the fate of nations. From that day on, the sky held the power. The aircraft carrier became the new ruler of the seas, and the age of steel giants faded into history. But history, I learned, isn't just what nations remember. It's what individuals carry. I carried the sound of Morse's uneven breathing as he fought our dying avenger home. I carried the weight of Tommy's hand on my shoulder after the Zero exploded. I carried the image of the Japanese pilot's burning plane spiraling toward the sea. I carried the knowledge that in another second, in another breath, we might have traded places. Years later, long after the war, I visited a memorial wall. Rows upon rows of names stretched farther than I could see. Some were my friends, some were strangers, and somewhere across the ocean, on an island I would never set foot on, another wall held the names of the men who had died aboard Yamato. Different languages, different uniforms, same story. The soil remembers every footprint, even when history forgets the faces that made them. And as I placed my hand against the cold stone, I realized something simple and unshakable. Wars don't end. They only stop long enough for another generation to remember them. This was one man's story, one voice carried across the decades from a sky filled with smoke, steel, and choices no human being should ever have to make. His memories belonged to a single plane, a single crew, a single battle. But the echoes of those memories reach much farther. They reach every sailor who stood watch on a dark horizon, every pilot who climbed into a cockpit wondering if he'd ever touch the ground again, every family who waited by a quiet window, praying for a letter that never came, every name carved into stone on both sides of the ocean. When we talk about history, we often talk about ships and guns and tactics, but the truth is simpler, quieter, and far more human. History is built out of ordinary people placed in extraordinary storms. People who did their duty even when it broke them. People who survived not because they were fearless, but because fear never stopped them from moving forward. If you're listening to this from somewhere safe, from your living room, your car, your quiet bedroom, take a moment to remember the men who never made it home. American or Japanese, soldier or sailor, friend or foe. They all wanted the same simple things. Another sunrise, another letter from home, one more chance to breathe. Peace was bought with their sleepless nights. Now, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Tell me your city. Let's see how far this story travels.